This is Nick from Mob Tales. Hope you guys are doing well. Please like, share, and subscribe and all that fun stuff. And leave any comments. We definitely would appreciate that. Today we have a very special guest, Seamus McElearney. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it. I did it right the first time. But Seamus, thanks a lot for coming on our show. Just to give people a little bit of an background rather. Seamus worked investigating the organized crime figures like Anthony Campo, who he flipped, Vinnie Palermo, who was very famous for Wiggles in Queens Boulevard in Queens, which I actually been to many times. Don't want to tell too many people that, but yeah, it's true. Uh, many moons ago. So Seamus, my first, thanks for coming on the show. First of all,
It's great to be here,
definitely,
Nick.
yeah, definitely appreciate it. Um, My first question, which I think a lot of people who are not familiar with what you do and what a lot of guys like you do, because we're only given like the generic information. Seamus did this, and like Joe Pistone, Joe did this, and whatever, and we're only given like the foundation. And a lot of people, like even myself, I'm curious how you guys go about this. It's a very risky job, very scary. You're dealing with psychopaths basically. Um, what was your basic, like, I wouldn't say training, but preparation to know how to approach people like this?
Well, I had a great mentor named George Hanna. So George was from Brooklyn, and he actually started this entire case. How this case starts is someone tries to rob the World Trade Center, and they actually do. This happened in January of 1998, and three people did rob the World Trade Center, but when they came out, they actually took their mask off and got caught pretty quickly. The mastermind behind that is a guy named Ralph Guarino. Ralph basically reached out to George because he knew that the were going to start to cave in, and George turned him into a proactive witness. What I mean by that is someone who's going to make consensual recordings. So I got to the squad about, I'd say, 10 months later and got to a squad called C10. C10 was responsible for the Bonanno family, but also because George flipped him, we actually were responsible for Ralph. And Ralph was a proactive witness. When you have a proactive witness, a person that you keep on the street who makes consensual recordings, you never know where they're going to go. And where Ralph led us to was the Brooklyn faction of the DeCavalcanti family. So that's how the New York FBI starts to take down the Jersey family. And to your question there is I watch George operate Ralph, and I, as a new agent, because this is my first squad, I kind of seen how he treated him. He treated him with respect. And that's one of the things that I learned as a new agent is how you try to get guys to flip is to treat them with respect. And that was the most important thing.
Okay. Well, I mean, now George Hanna, I'm assuming he's Italian. I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. Now here you are, nice, good Irish boy, going after these heavy-duty Italians and these guys can smell a rat from a mile away, or smell something that's not that's fishy, especially somebody in your position. Um, so not to jump the gun too much, but Anthony Campo was kind of your target in a way, I believe, and you managed to flip him just like George flipped Ralph. Um,
Right.
but Ralph actually went to him, right? Didn't Ralph go to him?
Yes. So Ralph called George because he knew he was going to get arrested pretty quickly. So what happens was we operate Ralph for 2 years. During that 2 year period, he probably makes about 300 consensual recordings. And then we use his information to have our first indictment. And that indictment is in December of 1999, where we arrest 39 people. And as a new agent, I'm hoping to be on an arrest team. But because of all the hard work I did during that year period, they tasked me to be the team leader to arrest Anthony Cappo, who is a violent DeCavalcanti soldier from Staten Island. So I was the team leader to arrest him.
Okay. Now, Um, the hard work that you did with George Hanna dealing with Ralph. Okay. Can you please give us a little bit of an insight of what kind of work you actually did under George?
Okay, so when you have a proactive witness, right, you have to give the ruse to the bad guys that he's not cooperating, right? So you have to have him do some criminal activity that's authorized by the government, such as maybe selling cigarettes that are stolen, selling some stolen goods, and you're constantly trying to keep him safe because he's wearing a recording device, right? So God forbid that the bad guys were to find out where the recording device is, they could kill him. So that's the most important thing is trying to keep him safe. Also, you got to make sure that he's still, operating in a straight line, right? You want to make sure that he's not committing any criminal activity that he's not supposed to be doing, right? So that's a task there. When you have consensual recordings, someone has to listen to those consensual recordings. And as you're well aware yourself, a lot of the mobsters talk in code, right? So you could have like a 3 hour tape and you're trying to find that golden nugget of information. It takes time to listen to a consensual recording. So a 3 hour tape could take you 6 or 7 hours to actually listen to. So you have to transcribe that. So I would help George do that. Also, back then, we had a dedicated surveillance team assigned to Ralph for his protection. So I think during that 2 year time period, we probably had about 1,000 surveillance logs. So my responsibility was to kind of catalog those logs and get them in order. So what would be beneficial for trial is when you would have a consensual recording, a witness, and then a picture to go along with it. That's kind of damning for trial when you can have a voice, a picture, and the actual witness to testify. That's pretty good the evidence to have at trial.
Now I know something about tapes. I happen to have FBI tapes of my own of somebody I knew that went away, who passed away in prison, uh, who was good friend of mine, who was connected with the Gambino family. And I actually have the tapes because I'm very good friends with the family. I'm not going to mention the name, but nevertheless, when even I listened to the tapes. I don't know what the heck they're saying half the time, and a lot of it is gibberish, and
Hmm.
some of it's such stupid talk. It doesn't mean having anything to do with anything. Um, and I know, I mean, just me doing it myself is very painstaking, and I thought to myself, I give these guys a lot of credit to sit there and listen to this stuff for so long until they find something that's even worthwhile. And then I also understand that if they, let's say you're recording, listen to the recording, and they're talking about something about their wife or about their kid, you guys have to shut it off because it has nothing to do with anything. Am I correct?
Well, that depends if it's on a Title III. That's a phone tap that you might have. If it's a phone tap, then yes, there are rules related to that. But it's a consensual recording where you actually have the witness who's making a recording. You can listen to it, but there's no need to listen to it. We wouldn't really want to listen to that because, as like you said there could be hours of tape. So, we're really we're not concerned about that. We would fast forward it, but it's not we can't it's not that we can't listen to it. We just wouldn't want to listen to it. But a phone interception when you're up on someone's phone is different. There's laws related to that.
Okay.
Yep.
So, like I said, conceptual recording is different than a phone tap.
Right. So a phone tap, you get authorization to do that for 30 days. A consensual recording is when you have a proactive witness, such as Ralph. And when I worked the Colombo family, we had many of those guys out there that made tapes. So they're consenting to make a recording. So they are out actually making a recording against a bad guy, as I would say, right? And that we can listen to those particular tapes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So well, in that respect, that's different. In other words,
Yeah.
Ralph was actually recording possible criminal discussions.
Acti- Right. So he would have a recording device on him. I can't say what type of device he used, but he would have a recording device on him, and we would send him out at our direction against guys. Now, the beauty of that is when you have a proactive witness, you don't know who he's going to ingratiate himself against or who he's going to get involved with. And that was the beauty of this. He led us to the Brooklyn faction of the DeCavalcanti family, which included Anthony Rotundo, Vincent Palermo, it was Anthony Capo from Staten Island. So there was a bunch of guys that the Bureau really didn't know too much about.
Okay. Um, I remember, if I'm correct, well, I don't know if it was the Cavalcanti family or it was probably it was probably the Bonanos, I believe that I think that after, I think around the 90s, I think it's around that time period when they were um, initiating guys. I think it was Vinny. I think it was Vinny Palermo that made this rule that guys had to strip down to make sure they didn't have any recording device on them.
Right.
Now I know
That
Vinny. I know Vinny. Vinny was very. I had the pleasure of meeting him once or twice at the Wiggles, as a matter of fact. Um, this is when I was a bad boy. But anyway, um, nevertheless, I know Vinny was very paranoid and he didn't like trust anybody. So I'm really shocked of how you were able to manage this. And Campo was obviously, I don't know if Campo did it. I don't know if Campo was used any kind of recording device or not. I'm not sure.
No, he did not. So what happened was we had our first arrest in December of 1999. I arrest him. He gets remanded. But based upon my conversations with him that day, I was able to flip him. And at that particular time, Anthony Capo was reporting to Vincent Palermo. And then, as you know, we have a spiral effect of cooperation where Vincent Palermo, 3 months later, he decides to cooperate as well. And Vinny and Anthony did a lot of criminal activity together.
Right. And it's interesting you say that because I know Vinny Ocean, who's known, um, moved to Texas and he opened a
Yes.
strip club down there with his son. And there was a lot of discussion that um, he was given carte blanche, able to do whatever he wants. How is he still making money? How is he allowed to do that? A lot of people questioning it, saying, wait a minute, he did X, Y, and Z, and yet he's able to open a strip club, a guy like himself with his background. How is that even possible?
Well, he went into the program, right? And then he was exposed down there. If I remember correctly, a reporter from the Daily News actually found him, went down there, and I think it was on the front page of the news. This is years and years ago. I can't speak for Vinny, but he didn't change his colors where he just went into the same business that he was in before. He really
Mhm.
shouldn't have done that, but he went into the same business that he was in before. We can't stop him from actually trying to do that. He's free to do whatever he wants. To this day, I know that there was one allegation where he had trouble down there. He didn't get arrested, but I think he might have gotten sued, or there was some civil suit related to someone else down there. But he didn't get locked up, though.
Yeah, it was something that happened in the strip club, actually.
Right,
Some of one of the
exactly.
girls or customers, something to that effect.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
I think it was
and
another if I remember correctly, I think it was an other lady who owned another strip club or something down in that vicinity. But I'm not too sure of the details of it. But I know it was related to like a civil matter.
right, but so is but when you so is Vinny out of the program then
No,
because
so
of
and that's something that so the program is run by the Marshal Service, right? And you actually have the choice to go into the program or not. So and that's one thing that happens too, is people think that when you go into the program, you get your new ID and you're off to a whole new life. There is time that you have to go to prison. So there's certain prisons throughout the United States that are attached to other facilities where you have to do time. So Anthony Capo, he did 4 years in a prison before he got bail. Vinny, I forget how much time he did, but he was on bail. Then he got remanded because he had a hiccup at trial. If I don't know if you read the book or if you remember how he screwed up at trial. But then he was remanded, so he did a couple years as well. So when you're done with your time in prison, then you have to make a decision. Your decision is, do you go into phase two of the program where you would try to get your fake ID, like a new passport, a license, social security number, or you decide to go off on your own where you keep your name and you just go off on like your own. So Anthony Capo went into phase two of the program and Vinny went into the phase two of the program. Now here's what happened is the program is extremely strict. That's why it's so successful. So a lot of guys go into phase two of the program, they get their identification, and then they resign from the program. That's what happens a lot of times because the program is so strict. Like for instance, if Anthony Capo is in the program, he just can't pick up the phone and call me. He has to go through the marshals, and then the marshals, they would call me, and a certain phone number would pick up that I know it's them. So, and also he just can't get on a flight to go visit his family. It's all arranged through the Marshal Service. That's why the program is so successful, and that's why no one has really gotten hurt through the program. But that's what the public doesn't realize is you just don't go into the program and get a new ID. You have to go to jail first. There's certain facilities throughout the U.S. where you go to jail first.
Yeah, that's usually the case because that's like
Yep.
that's like you got that's part of the deal. I said, okay, we can do
Yep.
this for you, but you got to do this for us, kind of a thing. Because like you said, they'll say, okay, you become a you get in the program and you get scot away, scot free. You don't serve any time. No, I don't think so. So
Yep.
because otherwise, well, otherwise wouldn't make any sense. Only one side is winning; the other side's not getting anything. Doesn't make sense.
And and when you plead guilty, you have to plead guilty to all your crimes, not just the crimes that you're charged with. You got to plead guilty to all your crimes. And the reason that you do that is so that if you were to testify, you don't want a defense attorney to come out and say, "Oh, didn't you tell them about this crime or that crime?" Because then that would look very shady in front of a jury, right? So that's why you always want to plead guilty to all your crimes. And then when you're at trial on direct examination, the prosecutor will get out all your crimes first so that the jury hears all your bad acts first, right? Before you go to cross examination.
So that means that when they do that, does that does that justify them to receive immunity?
Well, what it does is so like for Anthony Capo, right, when he was initially charged, he was charged with two crimes. He was charged with the conspiracy to murder Charlie Majuri, who was an acting panel boss at the time, and he was charged with mail fraud. When he comes in and proffers, the first thing that he tells us is three things. He tells us there's a leak in the Southern District. That's why he wasn't home when I went to go arrest him that day. He tells us that he is the driver in the Fred Weiss murder, which is probably the most indictable mob murder ever, where it was a race to kill Fred Weiss. He was a businessman from Staten Island who got involved with John Gotti from the Gambino family. And I think if I remember correctly, at least 15 people from both families, the Gambinos and the DeCavalcantis, have either pled guilty or have been convicted of that murder. And then the third thing he tells us is the murder of John D'Amato, where he was the shooter in that murder. John D'Amato was killed because he was the acting boss in the early 1990s, and John D'Amato's girlfriend comes to Anthony Capo and tells him that he's taking her to sex clubs in the city and having sex with men. And as Anthony Capo said, we can't have a leader of our family doing that. And he reports that to his superiors, Anthony Rotundo, Vincent Palermo, and at the time, Rudy Ferrone, and they decide he has to be killed. In addition, Anthony Rotundo tells us the other reason that he was killed was because he was borrowing money from the other families and saying it was for the DeCavalcanti family. Meanwhile, it was to cover losses that he had from sports betting. So those are the three things that Anthony Capo tells us when he comes in and proffers. When he pled guilty, which was in June of 2000, he pleads guilty to two murders, 11 murder conspiracies, and basically every crime you could think of. So he's gone from being charged with two crimes, which he would have faced about 20 years, to being exposed to a life sentence. So then when he's going to be sentenced, the judge can do whatever he wants. The judge takes into consideration he gets it's called a 5K1 letter from the government, which means the judge gets that letter, the judge can give him any sentence that he wants. He's exposed to life, but the judge can give him any sentence that he wants because he's provided substantial assistance to the government by providing uh, when he had to testify and when he provided evidence to the government. Anthony, during the time period, he testified for me 7 times, and that doesn't even include the times that he actually was prepped for trial, where people pled guilty because they didn't want him to testify against him. As I said, Anthony became a really good witness for the government, and people were shocked because, Anthony was a bit of a psycho before he was arrested, and he had hostile interactions with law enforcement, and actually even a lot of people within the mob didn't like him either.
Yeah, he was to work. I know. Uh,
And
but
that's something
so
within the
how?
book that I try to explain that in the book. I try to explain cooperation. I try to explain the program, and I don't think that's been done before. So if people buy the book, they'll kind of see how that process works.
Yeah, I'm going to mention the book eventually. Um,
Yep.
that's why I was asking about what I said earlier about how people don't really understand the process and what's involved and the steps of how this even gets done. 'Cause, I mean, we've been given a little bit of information, like from the Donnie Brasco movie, from Joe Pistone, whatever. But it's interesting you say that. Like when you watch Goodfellas, for example, even though both films are inaccurate in a big way, I don't mean just. I mean the storyline is totally off. But that's Hollywood. But nevertheless, like with Henry Hill, for example, you watch Henry Hill after he testifies, and then he's all of a sudden he's living in wherever he's living. It doesn't say that he served time. He went away. He had to do this. He had to
Right.
do something. He had to serve sometime. It never explains that. So people may think by watching the film, Millie, for example, oh, he flipped. Oh, now he's living in whatever, South Dakota, whatever it is, with his wife and everything. Um, like they don't show that he had to also do his time as well. It wasn't just like a walk in the park. So
And then
that's
and then
what you're
all and
saying.
then
It gives us more understanding.
also you don't want your witness to get sentenced too soon. What I mean by that is it's like if your witness does 4 years in jail and then say he gets bail and he's out on bail for like 5 or 6 years and doesn't get into any trouble, right? He lives a good life. He's doing good with his second chance. Then if he gets sentenced like 6 or 7 years later, the judge is more apt to give him time served because it looks like he's rehabilitated himself. So that's why a lot of these guys don't rush to get sentenced when they're a witness, because the longer that they're out on bail and don't get in trouble, they're proving to the government and to the judge that they've turned their lives around. And a really good example would be Anthony Rotundo. Anthony Rotundo basically didn't get sentenced for like 10 plus years, and Anthony turned his life around. He testified for me too for about 7 times. When he got out of the program, or when he went into the program, he actually opened up his own business, very successful.
Yeah, I know. I've heard of Anthony Rotundo as well. Now, you went from okay. When it comes to Anthony Campo, now these guys are hard nails guys. Like you said, Anthony's a very tough guy. He has, big cuyonas. He's not afraid of nobody, as we already spoke. Um, now, these guys, they have respect for law enforcement. I know they do. Um, they may not like you guys very much, but they have respect for you guys. Now, how was it that you were able, what does it take to flip somebody like this? Somebody that hard, that tough, that hard. I mean, he was to me, Anthony Campo was like Vinny. I mean, they're both very,
Right.
very tough street guys. And here they are, they're going to supposedly turn their life around. Totally, I mean, flip, not just flip on their friends and their family, but flipping on their lifestyle. It's not easy. Um, so how does somebody like you able to, what does it take?
Well, like what I had did prior to locking him up is I studied him left and right. I knew the actual charges that he was charged with. I studied his family from head to toe, meaning I knew his wife's name, the date of birth, social security numbers, phone numbers, everything, his kids, him. I knew he had health problems as well. He was a diabetic. So when I went to go arrest him, I started to establish a bond with him, right? So the first thing I did is when I first saw him, he comes out with a Dallas Cowboy jacket. I'm a Steeler fan. So right off the bat we had a banter, right? So that was good. I treated him with respect, as I said before. He had told me years later that all his interaction with law enforcement was hostile, that I was the first person that actually treated him like a human being. So that was a plus for me, right? Then, as I said, he was a diabetic. So I made sure that I had orange juice and chocolate just in case his blood sugar dropped. Kind of like an olive branch, just to make sure that I would treat him like a human being, right? Then, when I would start to ask him questions like, "What's your kid's name?" I would have the answer before he would answer. So I was letting him know that I knew a lot more about him than he knew, right? Then I would read him his rights. So when I read him his rights, he basically invoked his right to counsel and he wanted to remain silent. And that's exactly what I wanted him to do because then I started to play with him. In the sense is, I told you before, he was charged with conspiracy to murder Charlie Majuri and charged with mail fraud. So I told him, don't say anything, just listen to me. Now, I can't ask him questions, but that doesn't mean that I can't give him statements. So what I did is I told him, your plan was to ring Charlie Majuri's doorbell and basically shoot him in the face. Not to do a ring and run, but to shoot him in the face. The reason that you didn't do that was because there was a cop on the block. And I said, don't say anything, just let you think. And you know as well as I do, you can't lie to these guys. You lie to them and you're done. But that was fact. Now you got to put yourself in his shoes. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't know where I got this information from. He doesn't know who's cooperating with the government. And I'm giving him a hard truth right now. Then I started to talk about the mail fraud. And back in the day, remember that you would have a suite, right? And it was really just a mailbox that you rented, and you would be led to believe you had this nice big building. Well, that's what they did. And I just played with him. I said, "Oh, that's really cute." And again, I'm giving him a hard truth. And I told him, don't say anything, just think. So I kept on giving him food for thought. And then we would just banter back and forth. And we spent a lot of time together that day. And he saw that I was treating him with respect and treating him like a human being. He hadn't gotten arrested in quite some time, and he hadn't gone through pretrial. So I was explaining to him how pretrial works, where, I don't see that report. That's between you and them, and that's the ability to possibly get bail. So, and then I met his stepfather that day. I had to give him some money that he had on him and his belongings. I made sure he got his insulin that day. So we kind of developed a bond that day. And, he told me years later that he saw in me a person, because I'm originally from the Bronx, he saw in me that I could have went the wrong way, which I told him, the way I grew up, I had choices to make in life, and I chose the right path as opposed to the wrong path. I saw a lot of things in life myself, and he saw in me that he could have done good too if he had chosen the right path. And it's all the way that you're raised, right? So we had that discussion. Things went really well. And then I thought nothing of it at all. And then about a week later, his lawyer called me and said he had wanted to play ball. So that's how it all started. So I think the stars were just aligned, and I think he told me too that he was kind of sick of the life, and no one had treated him with respect before, and from there we just formed a nice little bond together.
Interesting. So his reasoning for turning on the life was just the fact that he wasn't treated right within the crew or whatever. So, he wasn't happy, so to speak, in the life, so to speak, which is kind of like a rare reason to do it. Reason to flip. Usually guys flip because not because they were mistreated or anything, 'cause that's kind of cheesy. It's because the
Yep.
life is the life. It's the way it is. Guys get mistreated all the time, but it's guys like Sammy Gravano. Sammy had a reason. John Gotti wasn't
Yep.
planning on killing him. You heard the tape. Sammy before was never had any intentions of flipping. So Sammy had more of a reason. Henry Hill had more of a reason. The other guys had real reasons,
Yep.
whereas Anthony's storyline was like, you know what? I want to break up with you. I'm tired of you. I don't like you anymore. I mean, that's kind of a
And
weird
and
reason. And it's you
and
know,
and
so,
and like the thing that was funny was it's like unbeknownst to me is that's the first made member in that family to ever flip in their 100-year history at that point in time, which I didn't know, and I didn't think that I did anything significant. I just was trying to get more bees with honey, right? And just trying to flip people because as we all know, the mob, they never commit a crime alone. They always commit it with people, and that's what you're always trying to do. Just build the foundation and just keep on building blocks. And that's what actually had happened with him.
what's really also interesting is that the Cavalcanti family. I don't know if you and Anthony ever came up with this discussion after he started cooperating and working with you guys. I don't know if you guys ever talked about the Sopranos because the Cavalcanti was supposed to be about the Sopranos, more or less.
Right.
Did that discussion ever come up?
Yeah, and it's so funny how, even though the director says he didn't speak to anyone, there's so similarities between the show and real life, such as, right, in the first season, the boss dies of stomach cancer. In real life, Jake
Hmm,
Amari died of stomach cancer in
that's
June of
right.
'97, right off the bat. We talked about Vinny's strip club, right? So the strip club is in Jersey, but in reality, Vinny had a strip club in Queens. We talk about the gay angle, right? John D'Amato got killed because he was gay. We talk about
Right.
the unions, right? So the DeCavalcantes control two unions, Local 394, the labor union, and they actually started Local 1030, the asbestos union. So there's so many similarities between the two. Also, as I said, this investigation started in January of 1998. The show started in January of 1999. We actually have a consensual recording in March of '99 that Ralph made with DeCavalcanti members talking about the show and them saying, "This is you, this is you, this is you."
Yeah, yeah.
That
I
that
heard
was
that conversation.
priceless for trial. That was priceless for trial. So there's so
Yeah,
many
that is
things that are
pretty. That's
similar
pretty
between
funny.
the two.
Yeah, I mean, for people who don't know, Sam the plumber was the original boss of the Cavalcanti family back in the 70s, 60s, 70s. They used to
Yep.
call him Sam the plumber. He was a
Hmm.
big wig, very important. And they got him on tape too back in the day. Huge
Yep.
recordings. They planted a bug in his I think it was his cafe or club or one of the two, something like that. I don't remember exactly where, but they did. And I have a booklet that has all the recordings, and I've read
Oh,
them, and
really?
it's pretty funny, pretty interesting actually. Um, now, when it comes to now when Anthony after Anthony flips, a lot of guys get indicted. I'm sure. Now, was Vinny also part of that
So,
trial
so
or no?
Vinny, so Vinny actually gets arrested the same time that Anthony got arrested, December of 1999. Anthony flips first, Then Vinny flips 3 months later. Then a month after that, Victor Dichiara flips. So we go from having no one to having a soldier, an acting panel boss, and an other associate. And we go through the same process there where we proffer them, we get them to plead guilty, and then we're going to use the three of those gentlemen's information for our next indictment, which was in October of 2000. And that became known as the hierarchy indictment, where we arrest the official boss, John Riggi, Steve Atabli, the consigliere, a bunch of captains and associates. I think we arrested like 13 or 14 people that day. What's significant about that arrest is an associate named Frankie the Beast Scarabino comes forward and tells us he wants to cooperate. So now we have another person that's in the door as well. The information that's significant from him is he tells us that he's got a contract to kill Anthony Capo, Anthony Capo's wife, his kids, and a contract on law enforcement. So that's significant information. Now, he said what crossing the line there was killing the kids, and he was not going to do that. So that was his line. And as I said, now he cooperates. So now as I said, we're just having more and more people cooperate. We have a spiral effect of cooperation here. We're up to four more people that are going to cooperate.
Well, what I find interesting is, okay, so you have all these different guys, Vinny, Anthony, Fred, all these other guys, characters that are coming on board. Now, don't these stories that whatever they may have to say, don't they overlap? Like you're hearing the same thing again? Like
Well,
it
that's that's
would
a
be,
great So that's a great point, right? So one thing is, especially when you have a defense attorney, they're all going to say, A, that they decided before they got arrested to cooperate. And one thing that you said earlier there about Vinny, before those initial arrests, Vinny wanted to kill everybody. He wanted to kill Frank Scarabino. He wanted to kill Frank D'Amato. He wanted to kill Ralph. He wanted to kill Charlie Majuri. So the last thing one of these guys would say is, okay, why don't we cooperate if we get arrested? That would be a death sentence for them. So that didn't happen. Second of all, when we put these guys into facilities, they are never together. The reason they're never together is so that they can never get their story straight. Now, if me and you had done something together 10 years ago, right, and we were to talk about it tonight, we would be off a little bit. As long as we got the main components of the crime correct would be the main thing, but we're going to remember things differently. So when people testify, if the story is exactly the same, that's suspicious. But as long as we get who the shooter is or who the driver was, that's fine. But if you get the code of the car wrong, that's normal because we're talking about something from 10, 15, 20 years ago. So with these guys, yes, you're going to hear stories that they're involved with. But as I said before, with the mob, you had many people that are working together to commit a crime, just like the Fred Weiss murder. There must have been about 10 Cavalcantis on scene related to that murder. So, yes, it helps us when Vinny says that these 8 people were there. Anthony says these 8 people were there. So, yes, they're going to overlap. The more people that you can have tell the story, the better it is for the jury because it makes both of those guys believable.
okay. Well, what I meant by overlapping, that's one point. But what I meant by overlapping is like, okay, if Ant says this, Vinny says this, and let's say whatever, Frankie says this, for example. And yeah, the stories may differ a little bit, but they're kind of the same. So how does it, what I meant by that is, okay, so the jury says, wait a minute, we're hearing the same story 3 times in a row. It may vary a little bit. So wouldn't that, how would I say this, not help you guys where it's like, well, we're just, it's like a broken record. Like we're not giving them anything new. We're giving them something that they already
Gotcha.
heard already.
Right. Well, because when they testify, they're not just testifying about that one crime, they'll testify about other crimes. And what
Hmm.
happens, especially in the mob, right, is Vinny might have a conversation with the consigliere that Anthony might not have been privy to. So Anthony can only give you a certain part of the story. The captain can give you another portion of the story, and Vinny, who's speaking to one of the acting panel bosses, can give you the final part of the story. So some things will overlap, but they won't all overlap, and that's how you kind of put the whole pieces together. And then it's up to the prosecutors to do that during their closing arguments, right? To kind of put everything together.
Now, I know defense attorneys always try to turn this around, of course. And they're going to say, well, Vinny is saying this to save his ass. He's going to say whatever the FBI, whatever the government tells him, he's going to say. So
Yep.
that's usually their way of getting
Hmm.
around it, trying to convince the jury that this guy's just BSing, saying whatever he's going to say to save his own ass. My client didn't do X, Y, and Z. This is all hearsay or whatever. So I know that's a battle that you guys have to go through. Um, so how do you manage to convince the jury that look, my uh, Vinny who's testifying is not just saying this because we tell him to. So I'm like, how do you get around that without the jury saying, yeah, maybe the defense attorney's correct?
Well, it's like the defense attorney is just trying to do their job to get their client off, right? So they'll do whatever they possibly can to do that. But I think it goes back to how we have our witnesses plead to all their crimes, right? I think that's important, where I'm not telling them to plead to their crimes. And we've had a couple of defense attorneys say that. It's like, you're telling them to plead to whatever you want them to plead with. I'm like, we don't know half the crimes that they're telling us about, right? Because a lot of these crimes go undetected. It could be a robbery of a jewelry store or a clothing store. So I think that's how the witness gains the credibility there, where initially with Anthony Capo, he was charged with two crimes, but then he exposed himself to a life sentence, where now he's pleading to a lot more crimes, a lot of crimes that we didn't even know had existed, right? So I think that's how the jury can see the witness is telling us the truth. Plus, the prosecutors, they tell you during the opening statement to criticize the witness. That they are not doing this for their health. They're doing it to get a reduction in their sentence, to criticize their testimony, look at it, to go over it. So the government is being very open to look at the witness and to see how they're going to testify. So we try to be as open as we possibly can, but we don't tell the witness what to say. You know, like one of the thing, especially when he had testified for me, one lawyer kept on going at him saying that he was a horrible person. And Anthony, to each his own, he would say, I'm a work in progress. Like he recognized that he was a horrible person before, a person who never really worked, and that he was trying to change his life, that he was going to make the most of this second chance. But it is a difficult thing. And it's, even now, right? Trying to get 12 people to agree on anything is a very hard thing to do. So when you get a
Right.
conviction, that says a lot.
No kidding. But like you said before, like the defense attorney will all say, the defense attorney will say, look, um, ladies and gentlemen, today we have a gentleman here who's going to testify, and you've heard the amount of crimes this guy did. So he's looking to get under his wrongdoings, and he'll say anything just to so he can get a reduced sentence, get away with murder, get away with this and that. Are you going to allow him to leave? You going to allow him to believe what this guy's saying? In other words, they'll paint him into a devil, which is what their job
Yep.
is to do. So how do you guys are turn the jury's mind around and say, wait a minute, yeah, he's testifying, but he wants to change his life. He wants to make himself better. I'm sure that's a very difficult thing to do.
It is. And what we used to say too is, right, especially the witnesses, they used to lie to stay out of jail. Now they're telling the truth to get out of jail. And what happens a lot of times is too, right? This is what the defense attorneys do, is the more that you testify, right, that creates a record. So every time you testify, it's called 3500 material, right? So what they'll do is the defense attorney will go back and look at you testified 3 years ago at a trial. They'll see what you say there to comparing what you say today. And the thing is, if you're telling the truth, you're going to be consistent. And that's something that the government can kind of use against them then, because once the defense attorney opens the door, we can use whatever they say against them as well. So creating a record helps the witness as long as they're telling the truth. The truth will set you free, right? So, you just got to put your faith in the jury that they're going to listen to the witness and that they're going to believe him. But it's not that he's there for nothing. He's there because he wants to get a reduction in his sentence. But the government is not going to tell him what to say. We're never going to do that.
Well, now that this is been long done, it's a long time ago this happened. Um, I believe I'm not sure if the Cavalcanti family, I don't think so, are that active anymore. I think other families have taken over the area, like Genovese or Gambino, whatever. Not that the mob is strong; they're not even compared to what they used to be. But if I'm correct, the Cavalcanti family is not really under you guys under the radar anymore.
Well, it's always the needs of the Bureau. And I think, like right now, the needs of the Bureau is related to violent crime. I think it's been open out there in the last 6 months or so that the Bureau has reduced their resources like towards organized crime, which is a shame. It's like you really have to keep an eye on them. The mob's been around for 125 years. They're not going to go away. You really need to keep an eye on them because if you don't, they're going to rebuild, right? But I don't think the DeCavalcanti family has really ever recovered from the hit that we gave them back then. But they're still around. They're always going to be around. And it's like, as we all know, the mob likes to operate under the radar, right? That's the way that they're supposed to be. The mob hated Gotti because he was so flashy. So, we're not supposed to know about things, right? That's like the big thing. So as long as they're under the radar, that's the way they're supposed to operate. But the Bureau needs to keep an eye on them because if they don't, they're just going to rebuild. The squad I was on was C10, and we basically dismantled two families at the same time. Half the family, half the squad worked the Bonanno family, half worked the Jersey family. And that's one of the reasons
Well,
why I wrote the book is
so,
because we got tremendous press, and the press never put it together that it was the same squad.
well, they screw up a lot of times. But anyway, um, the like you said, I mean, the mob right now, even from my own knowledge, the mob is nowhere what it used to be. But um, they've gone pretty much underground, pretty quiet. You never hear anybody getting whacked anymore outside of Canada. They're crazy up there.
Right.
But over here, over here in the States, it's been pretty quiet, especially in New York, especially after Gotti. They've decided to go really quiet. There's nobody getting whacked out of the street. Some of that kind of stuff has been very played down. They have, from what I understand, they're more involved in stuff on the internet, offshore gambling, pornography, the usual, some of the old, they don't do so much of the old stuff anymore. You know, extortion and stuff like that. It's been kind of like, they can't even do it anymore. It's not like the old days. So would you say that's kind of true?
Yeah, and well, the violence attracts law enforcement, so they've been smart about that, right? The last like 15 years or so. So they've kind of slowed that down. But they're always going to be into gambling or into rackets like that. There's always going to be extortion. There's always going to be the thing with the unions. I think there was an arrest a couple of months ago related to sports betting. They got a little slick with that with
Yeah.
some of the techniques that they used, right? Related to X-ray tables and glasses. You know, Crypto is a big way to make money because it's unregulated right now. So that's an opportunity for them as well. So how you can to launder money that way. So until they get a grip on that, that's always going to be an opportunity there for them. But the
Well,
thing that
since
the thing they have to
they've
worry
shifted,
about
oh, sorry.
the thing they have to worry about right now is that the younger generation uses phones, right? No one likes to speak to each other now, right? Everything is either text or email. That's a record.
Yeah,
Everything's a record. So that's going to doom them.
yeah, that's for sure. Well, being that the traditional mob is pretty much not on the outs, but they're not batting 100 anymore. They has the bureau directed their attention to more of the more powerful organized crime, like the Colombians, the Mexicans, especially the Mexicans, the cartels, especially big time, that have taken over the drug market. They cornered other markets. The Russians, the Japanese, the Chinese, not so much, but these Albanian mob, all these other ethnic groups that have like sort of taking the place of the mob, generally speaking. Has the bureau directed their attention that way now?
Well, I've been retired for about 6 years now, but I know that, their focus right now, it's always the needs of the Bureau. And right now, they're gearing themselves towards violent crime. So that's the big thing. And when you say that, it's MS-13 and gangs like that. So yes, that's where it seems like they seem to direct their resources right now.
All right, and that's why you said it before that we still shouldn't the viewer should not lose focus, even though the MS-13 is pretty big and the Mexican cartel is pretty big. That it should not lose, their attention too much on the traditional mob because, like you said, they can rebuild in some way, bring Sicilians from over there or the Calabres from overseas. They could do that. They've done it already. I know they've done it in Philly. They brought some
Well,
Sicilian guys over here.
Well, even after 9/11, when I would go arrest a mob guy, they would always tell me that I should go after the terrorists as opposed to them. Kind of, to give them some more free reign, right? That's all they were trying to do, really. So they would always tell me to go after the the terrorists as opposed to them. So
Well, that kind of did happen. Didn't they? Didn't
yeah,
they
oh
direct
yeah.
their attention?
Yeah, so
It did
after
happen.
that, basically for the first, I'd say 6 months, all our investigations related to organized crime came to a screeching halt, and all our resources were all focused on that. So, all our court appearances, and we had just had a big indictment, as I said that before. We had an indictment in October 2000, and then we actually arrested Fritzy for the leak in August of 2001. So there was a bunch of indictments that we had, and then once that happened, everything just went on hold for about 5 months. It was crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that. Well, tell us a little bit more. Tell us a little bit about your book, where people can find it, all that kind of information.
Sure. It's called Flipping Capo: How the FBI Dismantled the Real Sopranos. You can go to Amazon or to Barnes and Noble. And also I have a website called flippingcapo.com. So you can feel free to look there too. And as I said, at the end of the day, I think related to stats wise, we convicted 71 people. We solved 11 homicides and had 7 trials. And as I said there before, Capo was the first made member to flip. And since that time period, that from 99 to like 2002, no other made member in that family has flipped since. So it's like 25 years plus. So either they haven't recovered or just no one has actually flipped since then. So it's a great, I think it's a good read because I kind of explain crimes too, because you've always heard about loan sharking. I go into detail as to what loan sharking is and how profitable it is for the mob, really. You know what I mean? How points and everything like, just related to that. I explained the trials, what things happen at trial. We had a couple of things at trial that did happen, especially with Vinny. What he did at some of the trials that we actually had. During that time period, I don't know if you remember, back in 2003, there was a blackout. So I talk about that, some crazy stories related to that, where Anthony Cappa was actually on the stand that day. It was crazy. So I think it's a good read because I try to explain things to the public that I don't think has been done before. I think that's the big part of it. And as I said, it was a great case. After that case, actually, I went from there, and they wanted me to go down and run the Colombo family squad. So I actually did that for about 9 years, and I think we were very successful there too. We actually dismantled them too. So.
Well, if you were to pick one family that's still somewhat surviving, I know the Bananas are kind of wiped out, so the Colombos. Their numbers dwindled to like 50 members, I think. I think the Genovese, if I'm right, Genovese, Gambino are the only two real have substantial members still, compared to Lucchese, Colombo, and Bonanno, which I know have been pretty much three of them been pretty much decimated. Would you say that's kind of true?
The Genovese family is the strongest family.
Yeah, because they had the least amount of guys who flipped, I think.
And they're really smart. They switch around the leadership of the family. So they're really smart. And it's like that's the thing is the bureaus had some successful cases, but they really have never got to them. So to tell you the truth. So it's like the Gambinos, they've been successful there. As I said, I'm one of the few people who's been part of dismantling three families, the Bananos, the Columbos, plus the Jersey family. But the West Side has been a strong family.
Yeah, you got that right. That's for sure. Well, Gigante left his legacy there, that's for sure.
Yes, he did. He did.
That's for sure. Um, well, Seamus, it's been amazing having you on the show. Really appreciate it. Oh, by the way, can people, and how can somebody want, if they like myself, if somebody wanted to get a signed copy of your book, how can they do that?
Sure. If you want to email me at flippingcapo@gmail.com, you can feel free to do that, and I can arrange to get a signed copy for you.
Awesome.
So
That's
it's
great.
flippingcapo@gmail.com.
Great. Oh, by the way, last question, Seamus. Since you've been retired, 6 years now, what is, do you miss the action?
I miss the people. So, but things have changed. The Bureau's taken a lot of shots the last few years, but I definitely miss the people.
So you don't have any thoughts of going back?
No, no. But those days are over. I had a great run though.
Yeah, well, you look very young, so that's what I'm saying. That's why I asked.
Well, thank you.
Well, Seamus, thanks a lot for coming. I'm sorry, yeah, right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Seamus. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. And guys, definitely check out his book. I'm looking forward to reading it, and I'm sure it'll be very interesting, even though half the stuff I know already. But still, I'm interested in reading it. Um, yeah. So, Seamus, thank you very much, and we'll definitely come up. Hopefully, we can stay in touch.
All right, Nick. Thank you.